It's a little bit strange. Don't worry, this is 6 feet. We measured it out. You like to introduce yourself? A little bit of a guest.
My name's Matt Brownstead. I'm the resident bending aficionado. Here for a guest appearance on the podcast.
Well, the cat's out the bag. The lion cat, or whatever it would be, is out the bag. We're doing the bending episode, much requested.
And we're talking about bending from the very pronounced show, Avatar: Last Airbender.
Of course. Not the movie, just to be clear.
Definitely not the movie.
It couldn't be further from the movie.
So, don't mind Joe back there.
Don't mind the noise.
We have a lot of fans around here. So. I mean, speaking of all the dust you just kicked up, I'm an earthbender. I don't know about you guys, but after taking multiple personality quizzes and also dissecting each bending from the inside out, I realized that Earth is where I'd want to be. I think we should go around the circle and discuss everyone so we know where our biases are.
Are you considering earthbending as what you would be or what you would want to be?
From the test I took, I would be an earthbender, and I also want to be one. So it makes sense.
I think you'd be an earthbender too.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what that means, but
it's not a good thing.
Oh,
it's not a bad thing.
But it's not a.
Okay.
But it's not a good thing.
Let's hear Mikey's answer.
I go next. All right. Personally, I think I would be an earthbender. I think I would be a firebender. Seeing as how firebenders are generally portrayed as more aggressive type characters, they're very proud and have big personalities. So I think I see myself as a firebender mostly. But personally, I would want to be an earthbender. I like the defensive stance that they have on bending and life. So.
I think I would be an airbender, just based on the tests and conversations I've had in the past. I think it would be coolest probably to be a waterbender though, because you could easily just make if you had a drink or whatever, just make some of the drink into ice cubes, so it wouldn't dilute the flavor or whatever, and it would chill it.
Is that is it the biggest thing that draws you to the?
I just think that's always spoken to me because it seems like it would be useful.
Lots of real life applications.
It does
everyday applications.
Yeah, it has at least one real life application. So I don't think I would be a waterbender. I think I'd be an airbender.
Yeah, you were pretty goofy. Okay.
So, I think I'd be either an air or waterbender. From the test, it said I was an airbender, but I have this intuition that I would be actually a waterbender. And this might be my biasy talking, but I'd want to be a waterbender as well as what Mikey said. I really like the drinks. Yeah,
mostly.
That's the only reason. There's nothing else. It's only the drinks.
Yeah, exactly. True.
Why ethically and morally do you consider yourself those elements? If that has anything to do with your decision.
Ethically,
or kind of emotionally, how
they emotionally, I would say that I'm more of a peacemaker when it comes to conflict. So that definitely aligns with airbenders, being spiritual and one with everything.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of water, healing and making sure that you're taking care of things, I also align with those. So those are definitely the core values that I have that I think that make me in both camps.
Absolutely.
With an airbender, I'm a pacifist. Heavy emphasis on the pass. Very small emphasis on the fist, both figuratively and literally. That's one thing. I'm also I'm not necessarily spiritual in the sense of today's spirituality, but I think spirituality in a world with an actual spirit world, I probably would be pretty spiritual.
Even in a world like this, just spirituality being connected with yourself and your
I'm very interested
your emotions and
I'm very interested in philosophy.
Yeah. Plus, being one with nature too is also being spiritual.
Yeah, and I grew up a pescatarian, so not quite vegetarian, but almost. And then also, I'm not the most. I've been told I'm not the most serious person ever, and it seems like a lot of airbenders are a little bit more lighthearted, which somewhat aligns with my personality.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
A little bit.
There's a lot. So I kind of said this before, but firebenders are portrayed in the show as more aggressive type characters. That's not obviously all firebenders, but I feel like that personally is just kind of who I am as a person. I see myself as strong and proud. So that's kind of why I connect to being a firebender. Earthbender, I would just want to be an earthbender because I kind of hold true the same values that they do as a culture. So I think that's kind of what draws me to earthbending.
Yeah, just to kind of echo some of that, I think what stands out to me about earthbending is how like consistent, like steadfast. They're very grounded people, no pun intended. I also think they think very clearly, and they also don't back down. So they're not going to like aggress you, but they won't back down. So I think it's something that I really vibe with lately. It's how I try to live my life. There are some downsides to the culture, but I think overall, King Boomy is one of my favorite characters. So,
easily.
So now that we've gone around and we've kind of seen what everyone's opinions and ideas are about what they would be in terms of bending, I want to go around and now ask, what's your favorite aspect of each element in the show? So like with fire, there's electricity. Water, there's the infamous blood bending. Air, there's spirit walking or being able to connect with the spirit realm. Then earth is metal bending. So like which ones do you think is like either the coolest and also which one has the most utility?
I don't know. I think the coolest is probably lava bending. Just because it's lemming as lava, like that's sick. That's pretty cool, and it's a little bit like I think it's also what makes it cool is how little you see it because you don't really see it as much as like lightning or astral projection or whatever. Also the water bending into ice I think cinematically is really cool, and obviously has a lot of utility as I've already talked about. And those are kind of the same idea. Temperature changes in your element. I think that's really cool and really applicable. And then, I think astral project, like all the airbending subcategories aren't really that useful necessarily.
Yeah.
But I think that's also part of like being an airbender. Yeah.
Grounded.
the element itself is very like versatile, so you can use it in almost any situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus, you don't always be throwing rocks and things, but you can always, I feel like air can be used in anything. It's either to deflect or also like you can also use it to like aggress.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's not always going to be earth all around you. Yeah. That's the only element you can never like guarantee having.
Earth and water are probably the toughest to come by for sure.
Yeah. Well, earth I think is worse because water you at least can grab it out of the air.
Like wherever there's earth, there's generally water. I think that stands true.
There's only super advanced benders though can like just make it out of thin air. Yeah. Like you can see as they started out, that wasn't something, but as like she became like she passed all her courses, but also on her own when she was training. Guitar, I'm talking about guitar. But like then she started to realize that like she can start to extract some of the water
from her surroundings.
Yeah, and I guess then if you can't extract from the surroundings, water is not super like useful necessarily if you're somewhere that's pretty arid, like a desert. And earth isn't very useful if you're like at one of the northern or southern water tribes, I guess.
I think that's what makes waterbending so powerful, though, is that you can draw from your surroundings and that there's almost always water around you in some form or another.
Yeah.
So that's what makes waterbending so powerful.
Most large civilizations are built around fresh water sources, or at least water sources. You look at like the United States, most cities are on ports, and if not, like Chicago is on a major lake. So, and there's a lot of like trading options through that. So you're usually going to be somewhere that's going to have water. And I think if you're not, I think like they did a good job in the show of finding opportunities where the people's bending wasn't as useful. Like in the desert, obviously the gang, the boomer gang or whatever you want to call it, was pretty weak in the desert because Toph couldn't really see using seismic sense, and Katara had no water. So it's really just relying on Sokka and like a little bit of Aang as well.
So the two kind of subcategories of bending techniques that stand out to me the most are probably metal bending and probably blood bending. Metal bending just because of the way it was created in the show. Toph, one of the main characters, created it herself, and she's like a 14-year-old girl, and she's so like in touch with her bending and her senses that she created a new bending technique and has like just mastered it almost instantly. So I think that's just like a really cool aspect of that bending technique. And then blood bending because it's not as talked about in the show as all the other bending technique. It's definitely a lot less common to see. And also the way that Katara kind of encounters blood bending first and first learns how to use it is cinematically pleasing, as well as it's kind of cool to think about how blood bending actually works. And blood bending is essentially allowing people to, or making people do your will by controlling the blood in their body. So if you think about like how that would work, it's super interesting about just waterbenders being able to bend the water inside people's body when they're at their maximum sense and connection with their skills.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I kind of, so when you're talking about Toph with like creating metal bending, I want to take this riff. I want to see if you guys agree with me or not. So with Toph doing that, clearly showed that she was the most powerful earthbender living currently. I don't know like in the whole history of it, but the reason for that I think is because she's the perfect person in terms of aligning with the badger moles because she's blind. So like using her seismic sense, that gave her the most opportunity to become the most powerful, and then also like kind of diverging the earth bending and making like something new like metal bending.
And in the show, Toph is a blind girl who learned, she's born an earthbender, and she learned how to earthbend from blind badger moles, who are the original earthbenders. So that's how she learned to do it in the show, and that kind of, I agree when you say that kind of puts her in a stronger connection with her bending abilities, just by already having learned from them and learned how they bend and what they do.
And that's why I think like for every element though, I think it's very important you like, if you have the chance to like meet the original benders, like we saw like there's obviously not a lot of like dragons left, because that like, to become like a master firebender, your last task was to kill a dragon, and so there was only 2 left, and they were being kept by the Sun tribe, right? The Sun warriors. But when Iroh and when Iroh was called the Dragon of the West, he's the last to slay the last dragon, right?
Technically, he didn't actually kill them, but people think he did.
Yeah, obviously.
He
would.
Obviously, and side point, Iroh is one of my like favorite characters in the show.
Oh yeah.
But like he is a complete beast, and like you can see that he's unlocked, he's unlocked the whole element itself. Versus in Aang, once you get your arrows, you've unlocked, right? So you can do a lot of amazing things. And waterbenders, like the 1 second blood bend, I'd say are probably like because then you're literally finding like minuscule sources of water and being able to control it. So like So I just think like for if you choose any element, I think like you should strive to just become like the master in it, because then you unlock so much capability. But going on like what we were talking about, I think electricity is one of the cooler ones in my opinion. That wasn't really mentioned. But to be able to create that much power and energy out of thin air, like it's just so amazing to me. And like obviously we've only seen it in like aggression type scenarios where you shoot it at somebody and they try to redirect it, or they very much are eliminated. But I think you could use that electricity almost anywhere, since we live in an industrial world. Like imagine if you could like shoot a bolt of electricity into like a small like camera, for example, right? And you could somehow get it to work. Like then
it's like purely renewable power source.
Yeah, you are literally like what we were trying to solve today, like with like solar power, but you can do that out of thin air. So I don't know. To me, that was really cool. The second one I probably would say was bloodbending as well. Just to me, it was like, I think it's like very ethically wrong, but in those scenarios, like I think it's just you pretty much cannot be stopped by anyone. You can control almost every living thing, either plant-based or mammal-based. Or
it's a very powerful technique, but definitely a little bit ethically and morally frowned upon for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So for me, bloodbending, of course. And then if I had to choose another one, I'd probably say either metal bending or astral projection, like what Mikey was saying, just because like you're able to acquire knowledge through past experiences, like talking with like people who are already dead and like other masters. So like if you want to master an element, like what Nick was saying, your best bet it would be to talk to those people, because they already know what they're talking about. And like you can just gain more wisdom, like what Hank did, to become the Avatar in just a year. But kind of going on our next like subtopic, I kind of want to talk about bloodbending because I know Mikey has this theory that he wants to discuss about.
All right, I couldn't be further from a firebender. Still, I'm coming at you with a hot take. Bloodbending, misnomer. I don't believe that it's physically just bending the blood in a person. I really think Hama invented it and kind of thought that's what she was doing. But if we do a little bit of research, a lot of the first of all, about 70% of the human body is water, and not all of that is in the blood. It makes no sense to differentiate between what water you bend in the person and what water you don't bend in the person. For example, even bones, which are not very hydrated, 30% water. So my theory is bloodbending is a name for bending the water in a person, not for actually physically bending just the blood. The blood is included. That's my take. I just think that it's a little bit confusing the way that they phrase it.
Well, it's definitely that's a hot take. Yeah. But so what I have to say about that is just, I think though, regardless of even though the body itself is 70% water, the majority of that is still blood. So like, for example, whenever I like go on a run or if I'm like lifting my arm, that's the blood in my like muscles and then they're contracting with that blood. So like, I think it's more about, like the water is like distributed around your body, but I think the majority of it is still blood. That's the only like disagreement I have with you.
Yeah, that's true. But like, I'm just saying, like, even your bone, like, why would you, like, I know most of it probably is blood that you're bending, but it's not just blood. That's my point. Because also, if if you can take a droplet of water and lift it in the air and then drop it on the ground, in theory, you should be able to take all the droplets of water dispersed throughout a human's body, in their blood and in the rest of their body, in their whatever, bones, organs, and lift them up and splat them on the ground. Because there's no difference in terms of, like, the mechanics of it.
I think there's arguments for both sides, but you kind of have to think about it from whether we are in the world we're in today as in our world and the world where they come from, which is the Avatar universe, and the things that they know and the things that we know. It's the term is bloodbending, and that's what they call it in the show probably, because they didn't know as much about the human anatomy as we do now. The Avatar universe is, the setting of the show is in what seems like a less advanced kind of society, so they probably wouldn't know as much about the human anatomy and all those different things, bones, heart, liver, that make up the water content of a human's body. They just see blood, realize it's liquidus, and attribute that to the water in the blood that allows them to control people who are bloodbound.
Yeah, definitely. They're not the most scientifically adept. If you think about ancient Egypt, they thought that the brain wasn't really that like super important of an organ, and I mean they built the pyramids. So
I just think we can see from the setting that we know this is like an ancient civilization type format. But so I guess on the industrialization also, like what they know scientifically, but how like the Avatar society, like the whole show society operates is just like on like a lot of spiritualization and like ultra cultures. And so you can see like, and also since they can control someone would say the four most important elements in our world, they don't need everything that we need today, if you think about it. So I think the goals and the objectives in the show are like, they're not like what we have in reality, but it's trying to work in the fact that you can control the four most important elements in the world. So I think they need to somewhat adapt. So
I think they did
so you stay focused on that aspect and not something else.
That's
why and this is just to continue what I was saying. So like that's why all the live action remake, someone was flopped because you're trying to combine what we know reality, what we can do on TV with something that the original creators thought of, which cannot be compared. So I think you have to stay in a cartoon format, which they've done, and it's been one of the most successful things to ever air.
Agreed. I would love to see Tales of Kyoshi, Roku, Wan, anyone, but in the animated form. I'm not really I'm really excited about that live action remake that Netflix is making, but not as excited as I could be if they just did new content or even covered the comic books. They have the rest of Aang's life in canon. I don't get why they won't just cover that.
cartoons definitely make it easier to portray that fictional aspect than live action or real actors. So, yeah, they do a good job of it in the show too. If you think about their society and how they, have the bending techniques and they use those in life on a daily basis around the world, they do a good job in the show of, kind of recreating their culture and society and values to surround that aspect and, realize that they don't have to rely on technology or, the Industrial Revolution or stuff like that to fuel them and allow them to live.
So, let's now talk about Korra. And just in regards to, what you guys were talking about. So, in Korra, it's you could pretty much say it's the Industrial Revolution of that universe. Mm-hmm. So, kind of aligning with our values today, in our civilizations, do you think that their kind of cultural aspects that were in the original show in Avatar, do you think those kind of degrade as the universe gets more advanced, more civilized as what we are today?
I definitely think so, because obviously they still have similar values in Legends of Korra, but I think as they move towards that Industrial Revolution in society, their values kind of change a little bit and migrate more towards kind of how we think today. I think it's the first episode of Legend of Korra. She travels to Imperial City, and the first day she's there, she encounters somebody getting robbed, and there's police benders. There's different it's an urbanized city, and I think that that kind of feeling that you get from living in an urbanized city and having that technology is what contributes to how their values changed.
And also, you have a bigger disparity between benders and non-benders, and that's literally pretty much the whole plot of Korra. So it's interesting to see that there was some industrialization, but there was also some some divergent of how the society works together. Because if you were from the Earth nation, for example, if you bend or you didn't, you were very proud. There was a very high nationalism, mm-hmm. And that's kind of almost what the Firebenders are trying to do is they thought that their society was the best, and they're trying to influence and control the rest. So, it was very, and so I thought the nationalism, since you almost had a united world, right? They all came together, and that was Aang's job, which he successfully did. But then you had the Empire City, which is a central government for the world. And so, and you could see that, there's still that tension, those differences that were still there from the original show, but now they were being forced to all work together. So that could create some issues. And I don't want to say any spoilers, but if you watch the show, you'll see that that's very true. So.
I think it's definitely because in Avatar they don't exactly live together and do their cultures don't influence each other. A whole lot they do, obviously, in some points, and they're aware that the other cultures are there, but each culture is its separate kind of segment of the mm-hmm. world. And in Legend of Korra, that all just kind of goes away in Imperial City, and they're all living together, eating together, sleeping in the same buildings, stuff like that. So
I think just to interject here, we should go around the room and talk about your favorite character and why. I think that's a very good one. I'll start.
Yeah.
I think we should do top three. Because there's so many you like. I think this would be a hard decision. So, I think my first is probably Uncle Iroh. Okay, for the fact that Zuko's character plot is I think incredible. What he goes through and how he develops and adapts, and then becomes you could say one of the heroes of the show.
Yeah, he's extremely dynamic.
Yeah, so his character development was extraordinary in the show, but the person who guided him, and I thought Uncle Iroh made every decision he made was almost correct. Just the way that he was so in touch with himself, his nephew, and also with the element around him. I think he comes in every aspect that helps Zuko, helps Aang. So he's always there. He's also just hilarious. The things he does are just hilarious. So he's probably my favorite. Second is, I do really like King Boomy. Okay, I think I'm more good, Obviously you could say Aang or some of the team, which I will in a minute. But I just think the people that help them throughout their journey and are like such a big influence stand out to me more. And also like Aang learns, like that was Aang's buddy, right? King Boomy, but he was frozen in ice, so Boomy's a lot older. But I think that Boomy is my second character. Also love his personality. Third, I'd say is Toph. You know, obviously I'm biased, I'm Earthbender, but since we've already talked about like how incredible she is, making a whole new line of bending, she's also is blind, so she pretty much is a master Earthbender. She learned from the best. And also like how she assists on the team. And also if you see in Korra, her like effect on the world is like, you know, she has a giant statue. Her daughter is the head of police. You know, they all use metal bending in the police force, right? And it's also metal bending's used to like use part of the city and industrialize. So I think those are my top three for those reasons.
I really like that top three, and I echo a lot of those. Mine is kind of like tied for first place. Maybe one of them's a little bit ahead. So one of them is Iroh. You know, he's just like an amazing character. They kind of play that on you in the show. They make him to be, you know, that wise old man kind of vibe, and that he impacts like everybody in the show too. You know, he guides Zuko along the way. That's certainly like the main thing he does, and you know, he's experienced and he guides them in what Zuko and what he does. But he also interacts with Toph in the show, and he kind of guides her through a problem she's going through. I don't remember what it was.
That was one of my favorite parts, is when two unlikely characters actually come together, work together. So that was
in your top three.
Yeah.
So they were together.
I'll let you get.
And you know, that kind of creates a little bit of a third aspect there, where Toph and Zuko are enemies at the beginning of the show, and they both are being assisted by General Iroh, and they kind of, you know, meet, and they realize that they both are familiar with Iroh, and you know, it adds a little kind of humorous aspect to the show, a little bit more depth. So Iroh is one of my top characters. He was also a super powerful bender too.
Yeah, top three fire.
Definitely less talked about, but
let's not get behind the back. Impressive. I think he's probably one of the best firebenders.
Yeah, he's
ever lived.
Extremely powerful.
I mean, him and Ozai, and then Zuko and Azula. He's probably second, but Zuko, once he gets the lesson from the dragons, and maybe a couple years later, might overtake him.
Yeah.
So him. My kind of tied for first, maybe a little bit under Iroh, is Toph. In the show, when you first meet her, she's like this helpless little blind 12-year-old girl. And the way that they develop her and create her into such a dynamic character over the show. I mean, I guess in the beginning they introduced her as a helpless little girl, but she's not really. She goes to like underground street fights and, you know, destroys all these like super powerful like male earthbenders as like a 12-year-old blind girl. And she just destroys them. And the fact about how she comes into the show later, it's Sokka, Katara, and Aang at the beginning, and she comes in later, and still has such a big impact on the show, and you know, everything that they do in the show. So
she also stops a whole drill. You know, when they're drilling through the wall, she stopped it by herself. Just put her hands up to stop a wall. Yeah.
And
so I think like her abilities and everything else are just underestimated.
Yeah, incredible.
What's your third?
My third is, this is kind of a tough one. I kind of want to go Sokka though, just because I love the kind of humorous aspect he always brings to the show. You know, he's always like joking around and kind of like sarcastic at times and stuff like that. And he just brings a really good humorous aspect to the show, even when sometimes it might be, you know, a little bit downtrodden, the feeling of the episode. That, and he's also, you know, a non-bender, and that's not something you see very often in their kind of gang. All of them are benders except Sokka, and to see him kind of staying with them and keeping up with them, or not in times, which is humorous, is, you know, it's cool to see that as a non-bender from him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I love everything you said. I mean, those are some of my favorite characters. I told myself when you started listing, I was going to try to make a list without using any of the ones you listed. You made it hard by taking Sokka, because I did. I mean, Iroh, I knew you guys were going to say, and I love Iroh. He would be in the top three, and Sokka, same. And I don't want to really necessarily put these in an order, but I'm going to go number one, John. because I really like what he stands for in terms of he refused to like hurt anybody. He didn't even kill. He didn't even burn. Who was the general guy? Captain
Zhang.
Yeah, whenever he was in that fight, and he disappeared, and then he showed up at the end, and
Jon Jon's so powerful. I think all the members of the White Lotus are incredible characters.
Oh my, but I like Jon Jon too because he's so understated, and even in the Battle of Ba Sing Se when they retake the city, he doesn't hurt anybody. He just pushes them back with fire. Like I think that shows such mastery, and I also just really
with such like an aggressive element, he's able to be one of the most passive characters.
Few passive firebenders. There's an entire nation of people that are portrayed as aggressive, and
and that's what
they like
Aang
to dominate,
needed, right? Because like an airbender is not an aggressive culture. So he needed. If he had an aggressive bender, it would not have worked.
So having Zhang Zhang, Iroh, and not really Zuko. In the end, he turns more passive, but Zhang Zhang and Iroh are kind of the more passive, spiritual, wise firebender. So I think that is what makes him so great. Zhang Zhang is definitely a good character.
I love him, and he's a little bit of an off the main beaten path character. He's definitely not, but I love him. Love Suki.
Okay. I agree with that.
Great character, because she's, again, non-bender, and I think sometimes the non-benders don't get enough credit. And the thing is, people will always say, oh, the non-benders don't get enough credit. And I think the natural response to that is to go, okay, Sokka gets a ton of credit. Yeah. And then you might even say Mai, Mei, and Ty Lee, because they're huge characters and they're very powerful. But no one really mentions Suki that much, because she's not as powerful, but she works super hard. She taught Sokka a lot. She's so mature. Like, I really like her interactions with Sokka, and I like her interactions with the rest of the gang. And so those are my two. But then 3 would have been on the list no matter what. I'm surprised no one else mentioned, because you guys are going to be hitting yourselves after this. 3, I'm going to go with Appa. Appa's maybe my favorite character.
He's your number 1.
I love Appa. He's amazing. He's super powerful.
Maybe Appa's a little bit at the top.
Yeah.
No particular
order. He's a bender. He's a bender.
First of all, he is a bender. He's an original bender. That's how they learned airbending, was from the Sky Bisons. He's so cute. He has. You want to talk about?
So Appa is a gigantic flying sky bison, as they call it in the show.
Yeah.
And this is assuming you don't watch the show.
6 legs.
He's got 6 legs. He's got a massive tail like a beaver, and he can fly.
Yeah, another tangent. Avatar, they, instead of having just ordinary animals, they combined very bizarre ones to create one. So, for example, a beaver bear, I think, is one.
Yeah, the only one that's not a combination is the bear.
There's
an actual bear. That's the one.
Yeah.
But I love Appa just because, I mean, people sometimes say Zuko. Oh, I love Zuko's character because of his arc. I like Appa's arc because he has to go through some very hard times. He has to relearn how to love. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah.
And
that actually is true.
Obviously, Uncle Iroh's Tale of Ba Sing Se story will bring tears to anyone's eyes. But I think the Lost Tales of Appa will bring tears to your eyes too. It's incredibly sad what happened to him because he doesn't quite understand what's going on because of his lack of English, and yet he still has the ability to rekindle his friendship with the gang. And also, without him, let's be real, is a non-starter.
Yeah.
The Fire Nation runs the world. But it's also interesting to see, he's almost as he's like a very intelligent species, like the Sky Bison, because everything Aang was saying, he could understand and act on it.
So, Aang and Appa could communicate, but nobody else could.
Yeah,
like rudimentary level of communication.
So I just love those are my my 3. Tried to go a little bit difficult.
That's a great list still.
Well, so everything you guys had said so far, very good points. Completely agree with everything that has been said so far. And with just like with Mikey, I'm gonna name some characters that haven't been discussed yet or talked about. So I'm going to go from bottom up. So 3.
Oh, give us some suspense.
So 3 is Zuko.
Okay.
And exactly what Mikey said, his story arc is amazing. He comes in as a character that you hate, you despise, and then he molds into a character you love. Kind of inverse to Breaking Bad, with Walter White being a good guy and then transforming into the big drug dealer he becomes. And I also like how he kind of accepts his uncle's guidance and becomes more open to all the other techniques of bending. So for example, with his fight with his sister, he actually utilizes all the different bending techniques. So even though he can't bend the other elements, he's still doing the actual martial arts. And that pretty much just gives him like a 1-up in the battle, and like it just shows that he's like very open-minded and spiritual.
After you're done, we should talk about how and when he transformed into like aggressive to spiritual character.
Yeah, I mean it's such a great like it's such a great story arc. And then so my second one is Ty Lee, just because she's so powerful and doesn't bend. She can literally stop people from bending. Like that's so OP, and I wish it was utilized more in the show.
Yeah.
But I guess that wouldn't be good at the beginning because she was on the bad guy side. But I also like her story as well. Like she kind of first, like you see her as this like woman who's in the circus, and she went there because she didn't want to be the same as her family. Since isn't she like the same person?
One of 11 who are like exactly the same.
Yeah, like they look. Do they look exactly the same?
I don't know if
they look exactly the same.
I don't think they're like sextuplets or whatever that is.
Yeah, I don't think there is nothing for 11.
Yeah.
But then, so like she goes there to get away, but then she's back with Azula. But then she finally like faces her fear of her and takes her down, and then she gets to become a Kyoshi warrior. So I think that's also another great story arc and transformation. And my number one is Momo.
See,
that's a good one.
That's a good one.
So like Momo, he utilizes the humor, just how like Appa and Sokka do in like the group, but also just like his inquisitiveness, like actually like getting into the group by like going to Aang whenever they visit the temple. And I also just love the scene with Appa and Momo fighting in their samurai outfits. That's probably one of the best scenes ever. And there's a meme with Appa being like, they compare it to Star Wars with General Grievous and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So such great riffs there.
Yeah. That's really funny. And I think it's interesting how Momo is a very humorous character, and they play under that strength, even though he can't communicate with Aang. So he doesn't talk, he doesn't have any communication with anybody in the show. He just like chirps every now and then, and like people kind of guess at what he's saying, but they never really know what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting how they use that.
2 characters in from your list. Maybe one of my favorite scenes in the entire show is when the gang, minus Aang and Momo, show up to White Lotus headquarters outside of the walls of Ba Sing Se, and they're talking and whatever, and then Bumi goes, "Wait, you guys are missing someone. Where's Momo?" And they go, "We're missing Aang too." He goes, "Oh, they have each other. They'll probably be fine." That's like maybe my favorite line in the whole thing. I love that line.
Yeah, and I also like how Momo's like almost like he's another like spiritual animal like Appa, because like whenever he goes to the is it the lion turtle?
Yeah.
Momo goes with him, so it's almost like he's a part of Aang. Mm-hmm. He has that like just very deep a connection, and also with Appa in the episode with all like the short stories, Momo like actually shows emotion of whenever he can't find Appa, when he actually finds like the print in the concrete or whatever stone it is. And I like how they just anthropomorphize Momo in that episode. It's just it's really powerful.
Wow. There's so much to talk about. I think we could talk about it maybe for another 10 minutes. Or even like an hour. Or a day.
Some could say 37 hours.
37.
And break the world record.
Yeah.
People have been asking. They've been saying.
If you guys want that, we could do that.
People have been chirping us. A lot of people have been in our ear on Twitter, MVC Podcast, saying, "When are you guys going for it? Going for what? The world record in podcast. It's 37 hours. It's held by a guy from the UK. He did 37 hours straight. We were going to do 48, but we might just do 38 if we get enough support. And we could probably talk about betting for most of that time, but we would do other stuff too. That's going to be it probably for this episode because, I mean, we got to save something. But it's been great talking to you. It's been great having you, Matt. Hopefully we can have you back.
Thank you so much for having me. Absolutely. I'd be happy to.
It's great to be in person once again. It's just very rare, and it's nice to be in this beautiful weather as they're working out, doing a little bit of construction on my backyard. But thank you guys. Anything else?
No, that's it. Good.